As of May 2025, the Indian government has launched a nationwide crackdown on illegal migrants, particularly from Bangladesh and Myanmar. States like Orissa, Meghalaya, and Rajasthan are actively identifying undocumented individuals, setting up detention centers, and coordinating deportations. The Supreme Court has reaffirmed that the right to reside applies only to Indian citizens, backing the government's right to deport those without legal status. There are two kinds of reactions people have when they hear that Indian government is deporting illegal migrants, especially Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar and Bangladeshi nationals. Some people feel sympathy. They say, these are poor people. They came here for safety or a better life. Why can't we just let them stay? Others feel anger. They say, they broke the law. They're taking our jobs and changing our culture. Why are they still here? Both reactions are human. Both have reasons behind them. And if you feel confused or caught in between, you're not alone. This is not an easy topic, because we are not talking about just numbers. We are talking about real human lives, real families, and real consequences for Indian citizens too. This isn't about just paperwork, and this definitely isn't about hate or cruelty. It's about who gets protected in India and at what cost. It's about how we balance our natural human compassion with our responsibility to protect our country, our jobs, our culture, and our most vulnerable citizens. Because the truth is this: India is a country that has always opened its doors. We gave shelter to Tibetan Buddhists when China invaded. We accepted Sri Lankan Tamils during their civil war. We gave space to Afghan Sikhs and Hindus after the Taliban returned. Even Jewish communities, centuries ago, found peace here when the rest of the world turned them away. India has a proud tradition of helping those in need. But here is what we must understand clearly. Those refugees came with permission. They were registered. Their presence was legal. And it was managed with planning. The current issue is very different. But what we are seeing now is decades of illegal migration, mostly from Bangladesh and Myanmar, involving fake documents, unmonitored settlements, and often a burden falling on the shoulders of India's poorest people. This isn't happening in isolation. It's affecting the lives of ordinary Indians in Assam, Tripura, Bengal, Delhi, Jammu, and beyond. That's why this conversation is not just political, it's personal and urgent. This video is not here to attack anyone. It's here to explain why so many Rohingya and Bangladeshi migrants came to India. Show the real-life impact they have had on India's economy, security, and social balance. Share the legal framework under which India is currently acting, and why the humanitarian argument against deportation is flawed. By the end of this video, you may still feel empathy for the migrants. It's natural, that's human. But you will also understand why deportation at this point is not justified, but essential for the well-being of Indian citizens, for our national identity, and for our future as a secure, sovereign nation. Let's begin. The influx, how and why it happens. Let's talk about how the situation began in the first place. How did so many Bangladeshi and Rohingya migrants come to India? The truth is, this didn't happen overnight. It happened slowly, quietly, over several decades. And many Indians still don't realize how serious and widespread it has become. Let's begin with Bangladesh. India shares a long border with Bangladesh, over 4,000 kilometers. This border stretches across rivers, forests, fields, and even open villages. For many years, it was not fenced properly and not strictly monitored. So people crossed over on foot, by boat, or with help of local networks. They entered illegally and initially settled in bordering states like West Bengal, Assam, Tripura, and later they expanded to major cities like Delhi, Mumbai, and Hyderabad. Most illegal migrants from Bangladesh came for economic reasons. In Bangladesh, many rural families are extremely poor. There is a shortage of land, especially in farming areas. The country often suffers from floods, cyclones, and crop failure. Wages are low and jobs are hard to find. By crossing into India, even illegally, they could work as construction workers, domestic helpers, agricultural laborers, or in small shops and factories. They're often willing to work for very low wages because they have no legal status and no bargaining power. This makes them attractive to some employers, even though it's against the law. Over time, many of them created fake documents like voter ID, ration card, and Aadhaar to blend into society. This helped them get jobs, benefits, even voting rights. In many areas, their children were born in India without any citizenship verification. This made the situation even more complicated. Now let's talk about the Rohingya. The Rohingya are a Muslim ethnic group from the country of Myanmar, also known as Burma. They lived in the Rakhine state of West Myanmar for generations, but the Myanmar government never fully accepted them as citizens. They were considered outsiders even though they had been there for decades. In 2017, the Myanmar military launched a brutal crackdown on Rohingya villages. Homes were burned, thousands of people were killed, entire villages were destroyed. Over 700,000 Rohingya fled across the border into Bangladesh, which already had limited capacity to host refugees. From there, around 40,000 Rohingyas entered India, mostly through Northeast, via Tripura, Mizoram and Manipur. They eventually settled in places like Jammu, Delhi, Hyderabad, Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh. Some live in refugee camps, others live in slums or informal settings, often undocumented and sometimes supported by small NGOs or local groups. So why is this a problem? The uncontrolled guest who enters without dharma invites imbalance into the household and kingdom alike. Let's be clear. Many of these illegal migrants are not bad people. They are poor, desperate, and trying to survive. That's understandable. But the issue is not about sympathy alone. It's about legal status, our nation's capacity, and what happens when millions of people enter a country illegally. Here's why it's a problem. They don't pay taxes, but use public services. They compete for jobs with India's poorest citizens. They often settle in unauthorized colonies which become overcrowded and unsafe. And in some areas, they are being used as vote banks or recruited by criminal and extremist networks. This is not fear-mongering. This is what ground report and government intelligence have confirmed. And because the problem has been ignored for so long, it has become a national-level challenge. So in a nutshell, illegal migrants came to India mostly through open borders, without documents. They settled quietly and built lives here, but outside the law. The numbers have grown over decades. This is not a small issue anymore. Many people assume, if they are just working quietly and living in slums, how are they harming us? That's a fair question, but the real impact is much bigger, deeper, and long-lasting, especially for India's poor and middle-class families. Let's walk through it step by step. Government resources are overloaded. A king must distribute resources wisely, for even a full granary cannot feed all if waste and misuse are left unchecked. Arthashastra. Every country has limited resources: hospitals, schools, ration, electricity, drinking water. India is no different. Our healthcare system is already stretched, our government schools are struggling, and in many areas, public toilets, garbage disposal, and housing are still inadequate. Now imagine adding millions of undocumented people into the system. They're not counted in the census, they're not part of official budgets, but they still use the same roads, electricity, water, and public service as everyone else. And who suffers first? Not the rich, not the upper middle class. It's the common Indian citizen, the tribal woman who's waiting 4 hours in a government hospital, the daily wage earner whose kids study in overcrowded classrooms, the young man who cannot find affordable housing in his own city. And remember, these illegal migrants don't pay taxes. That means Indian taxpayers are indirectly footing the bill for people who aren't even supposed to be here. The poor Indians are losing jobs and wages. To abandon one's people in pursuit of false charity is the first sign of adharma. Let's say an Indian mason in Assam earns 400 rupees per day, but a Bangladeshi migrant is ready to do the same job for 200 rupees. It's obvious who the contractor will choose. This is already happening in construction, domestic work, agriculture, and even in small-scale retail. As a result, Indian workers are either losing jobs or being forced to accept much lower wages. This is called wage depression. This doesn't affect the white-collar office workers. It affects tribals, Dalits, farmers, rural youth, and laborers, the people who are already struggling the most. And once again, they are being pushed aside in their own land. Number 3. Infrastructure in city is breaking down. When uninvited elements are not contained, they will corrode both structure and society like termite to wood. Chanakya Niti. Illegal migrants often settle in unauthorized colonies, overcrowded slums, or public land near railways, highways, and drainage canals. These areas often have no legal electrical connections, no clean water supply, and no formal sewage system. The result? Sanitation problem, outbreak of disease, water contamination, frequent power cuts, fire and accidents. The entire neighborhood suffers because local infrastructure is not designed for this kind of unforeseen, unexpected pressure. In cities like Delhi, Hyderabad, Jammu, and Mumbai, many slum areas with high number of illegal migrants are known to be overcrowded, unhygienic, and often involved in crimes like theft, drug trade, and ID fraud. It's not about blaming the poor. It's about acknowledging what happens when illegal population grows unchecked. Entire indigenous communities are being pushed out. A society that forgets its roots will lose both direction and dignity. Rig Veda. In states like Tripura and Assam, illegal migration has not just caused economic stress, it has caused major demographic shifts. Let's take Tripura. Before 1947, over 50% of Tripura's population was tribal. Today it is just 31%. The rest are mostly Bengali-speaking settlers, including a large number of undocumented migrants from Bangladesh. Now let's look at Assam. From 1971 to 2011, the Muslim population in Assam grew from 24% to 34%. This is not just due to birth rates. This includes decades of illegal migration from across the border. When indigenous communities start becoming minorities in their own homelands, it creates deep fear and anger. History has shown us that that's when protest, violence, and separatist movements begin. Vote bank politics. When dharma is traded for power, the kingdom rots from inside. Mahabharata Shanti Parva. Illegal migrants, especially those with fake voter IDs, have become part of vote bank strategies in some regions, affecting elections and governance. In many regions, local politicians have allegedly protected illegal migrants in exchange for voters, especially where forged voter IDs have been circulated. This turns a national security into a tool for political power. Higher crime rates in migrant-dense areas. To welcome those who live outside the rule of law is to betray who live within it. Bhagavad Gita. This is sensitive but important. Some areas with large undocumented populations have seen a rise in crimes like fake identity rackets, cattle smuggling, human trafficking, drug movement, and even terrorist activities. After the 2025 Pahalgam attack that killed 8 Indian tourists, intelligence agencies flag Rohingya enclaves as soft entry points for extremist groups operating from across the border. Even one such incident can ruin entire seasons of tourism, investment, and local peace. Let's be clear, not every migrant is a criminal or terrorist, but when people live outside the law, they are easier to exploit by criminals, terrorists, and political networks. In West Bengal's Malda district, close to Bangladesh border, law enforcement has repeatedly flagged fake currency and arms smuggling. In Assam's Dhubri district, border police have arrested many undocumented Bangladeshis involved in identity fraud. In Jammu, Rohingya settlers have come under investigation for links to trafficking and fake documents. When we ignore these signs, we put both citizens and migrants at risk. Illegal migrants affects everyone, but it hits the poorest Indians the hardest. They lose jobs, they lose wages, they lose housing, and they lose their sense of identity and safety. This is not sustainable, and after 40 years of delay, India cannot afford to look away anymore. What the law says. Let's ask a very important question. Is it legal to deport these people? Some people believe India has to keep them, others say India has every right to send them back. Let's understand what the law actually says, clearly and without confusion. Number 1. India is not bound by international refugee law. You might have heard the United Nations Refugee Convention of 1951. It is a global agreement that protects refugees and says countries should not send them back to danger. This rule is called non-refoulement. But here's the important fact. India is not a part of this agreement. India has never signed the Refugee Convention or its 1967 protocol. That means India is not legally bound to accept refugees who come without permission. India can choose who it wants to help and who it cannot. India has its own clear laws for foreigners. India has two major laws to deal with foreign nationals. Number 1, the Foreigners Act 1946. Number 2, the Passport Entry into India Act 1920. Under these laws, any person who enters India without a valid passport or visa or overstays their visa without permission is considered an illegal migrant. Indian law allows the government to detain these individuals, place them in detention centers, and deport them to their home countries. This is not new. These laws have existed since before independence. They are still valid and fully in force. What about the Citizenship Amendment Act 2019? Justice is not equal treatment for unequals. It's the rightful response to each according to their dharma. Mahabharata, Shanti Parv. Some people ask, if India has a refugee policy, why doesn't it apply to Rohingyas and Bangladeshi Muslims? Here's the explanation. The Citizenship Amendment Act passed in 2019 allows persecuted minorities from Bangladesh, Pakistan and Afghanistan to apply for Indian citizenship if they are Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, Parsis or Christians and entered India before 2015. It was made to help those who were targeted in Islamic majority countries due to their religion. The law doesn't apply to Muslims because they are not persecuted as religious minorities in those countries. This is why Rohingyas and Bangladeshi Muslims are not included. So again, this is not about discrimination. It is about who is genuinely fleeing prosecution and who is entering India for other reasons. What has the Supreme Court said? Even a just ruler must act firmly when the protection of the realm is at stake. Arthashastra. Some activists and organizations have filed petitions saying deportation is against human rights. But the Supreme Court of India, our highest legal authority, has already spoken on this. In May 2025, the court rejected a petition to stop deportation of illegal Rohingya migrants. It said, India is not legally bound to keep them. National security and law enforcement are valid reasons for deportation. The repeated petitions were an abuse of legal process. This means that even the highest court agrees India has full right to enforce its borders and protect its resources. Why the humanitarian argument against deportation is flawed. So far, we discussed how illegal migration began, how it has affected India, and what our laws say. Now let's address an important viewpoint. Many people argue that deporting illegal migrants is inhuman. They say it's against humanitarian values, that it's cruel to send people back to poor and dangerous places. This is a serious concern, and it deserves a respectful answer, not a harsh reaction. Let's understand this slowly and clearly. Humanitarianism means compassion for everyone, not just migrants. Dharma is not served by favoring one side alone, but by standing firm in fairness to all. Mahabharata. Yes, compassion matters, but compassion does not always lead to fairness or justice. Yes, we should help people in need if and when we can, but we must also remember, humanitarianism is not a one-way street. It applies to everyone, not just to people who enter the country illegally. It also applies to the Indian child who has no access to clean water, the tribal family waiting for 10 years for a government house, the rural farmer who lost his land to encroachment, the daily wage earner in Delhi or Assam who just lost his job to migrant willing to work for half the pay. These people are not illegal. They're not asking for much. They're simply asking their own government to protect their interests. If we ignore them in the name of human rights, we are being unjust. Humanitarianism cannot mean sacrificing one poor person to protect another, especially when the first one is a lawful citizen of the country. Every nation has a duty to put its citizen first. A king who does not place the welfare of his subjects above all else invites ruin upon his kingdom. Arthashastra. Let's be honest. No country in the world gives unlimited shelter to undocumented foreigners. Not the United States, not the UK, not Japan, not Australia, not even any Islamic country. In the US, even children born to illegal migrants don't automatically receive legal status. In Australia, migrants are held in offshore processing centers. If these developed nations with far greater resources can say no to illegal migrants, then why India, which is still rebuilding itself post-colonialism and post-partition, expected to say yes without limits? Because every government has a first responsibility to its own people. If we start putting illegal migrants before Indian citizens, we are not being kind, we are being careless. Being a citizen comes with duties, but it must also come with priority and protection. If a government does not protect its borders and prioritizes jobs and resources for its own people, then why should anyone follow the law? India has already shown generosity, but it cannot be infinite. Compassion without order leads to disorder. Law without compassion leads to tyranny. Dharma walks between the two. Bhagavad Gita. India has a long history of compassion. We gave homes to Tibetan Buddhists after China invaded. We accepted Sri Lankan Tamils fleeing civil war. We sheltered Afghan Hindus and Sikhs after the Taliban returned. We even gave safety to Jewish refugees after World War II. You cannot say India is cold-hearted, but in all these cases, India helped in a controlled and lawful way. Those refugees were registered, monitored, given space through government coordination, and helped without displacing local citizens. What we are facing now with Bangladesh and Rohingya migrants is very different. It is uncontrolled, illegal migration. It is happening quietly outside the law, and it is creating real, visible harm, economically, socially, demographically. Real humanitarianism begins at home. A tree that does not protect its own roots will fall in the storm, no matter how wide its branches reach. Before we talk about extending compassion to others, we need to ask some difficult but necessary questions. What about the Indian citizen who still lives in huts, attends broken schools, and waits years to receive a ration card? What about tribal communities in Assam and Tripura who are slowly losing their land, their language, and identity? What about the families who lost loved ones in riots sparked by migration-related tensions? What about the young Indians who were denied work or housing because someone undocumented was willing to work for less or settle illegally? What about the millions who have followed the law, paid their taxes, and placed their trust in this country to protect them? Let's not forget the villagers in the border regions of Assam, Tripura, and Bengal, whose lands were encroached, whose wages have been undercut, and whose culture is being erased. For them, this is not a policy debate. This is not a courtroom argument. This is survival. If we truly call ourselves a compassionate nation, then that compassion must start at home, with those who have built this country, followed its rules, and never asked for special treatment. Because in the eyes of many responsible nations, its citizen must come first. Let's not be that person who shows love and compassion to outsiders but is cruel to their own family at home. It's people like you and I who have the power to speak up and shape the kind of reality we want for our nation. Choose wisely.